Welcome to Soul Nutrition, where we discuss the various ways of nourishing our souls. I'm your host, author, speaker, and coach, Reina Rose. Today's guest is Kimberly Layne. Kimberly is a leadership expert and coach, and also host of the Power of Connection show on Jewel TV. In addition to her TV show, she helps organizations connect to greater revenues by strengthening the connections between leaders and their teams through consulting and public speaking. Kimberly published Connections Change Everything right before the pandemic, which is ironic considering our current distancing and isolation. Kimberly, it is a true joy to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Reina. I'm so happy to be here. It'd be better to be in person, but hey, we'll take it, right?
So that's right. We are having to do a lot of distance these days. And I'd love you to tell our audience a little bit about your background, your faith, and what has given you such a passion for making sure people truly connect.
Great questions. There's actually probably two questions in that I'll answer. So my faith I was raised as a Lutheran. I'm a pure German descent, so that's pretty traditional. And in the Midwest, so, pretty much church every Sunday at 8, and then Sunday school and catechism and all that kind of stuff, went through my life. So it was very structured, a very traditional kind of service and all that. And I'll be honest, I kind of maybe in my late 20s, 30s, was out on my own. So I wasn't going to church on a regular basis, but I've always been spiritual and always been God loving. Right. And so there's been a lot of challenges in my life. I think all of us can relate to the fact we've had challenges in our life, but I also look at the fact that it's God that has got me through those challenges, right? And He's never failed me, even though when at the time I was just either devastated or hurt or in pain or isolated, I always came out to the other side thanks to Him. And so knowing that no matter what crisis I get into, you're always going to be carried to the other side. That's always been a beautiful thing for me. So I have recently found a church here in Newport Beach that's Lutheran that I really, really love. And the pastor's such a great storyteller. So that's been such a joy. I volunteered right before this to teach Sunday school as well once a month, and to kind of host the congregation once a month at my house over food, because I love the power of connection over food and wine, right? So it was kind of, things were just kind of culminating with my book launch and then being a Sunday school teacher and all that stuff. And here we are, right? So that's kind of how from a faith perspective, and I am, I really don't care what denomination it is. I just think having a higher power, having a God that you believe in that can carry you and gives you the hope that you need to carry on. I don't understand how people can survive otherwise, in that they think that's why you turn to some addictions, because that's their higher power, right? So, but having God in your life, or a spiritual focus that heals you and gives you positive energy and can be your source of comfort and to reach out to, I think is so important, especially today, right?
And I love your story about kind of leaving a little bit and come back. I actually think that some of the most connected Christians are the ones who have, been in the church, but then sort of go away for a bit and come back. And it's a truer, deeper connection. And you also know what it's like to be away from God. And when someone is slipping into that position, instead of judging, you have grace because you've been there, and you realize that God will get you through, and He will pull you out of that muck, whatever it might be, even in those moments that you're not believing in Him, or, you're gone to some other kind of beliefs at the moment. God never stops chasing after us. And so I love that your story includes, there was a while that it wasn't my most important thing. And then now it is again. And here you are doing this business and connecting people. And that's really, God created us for connection. And so in the things I've watched of you in the events virtually, unfortunately, only that I've been able to participate in, I've loved how you've really shown even these virtual connections, they don't quite cut it as much as we think they do.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. So kind of answering your question about why I'm so passionate about connection. So um, at the young, innocent age of 10, I was sexually molested by somebody I trusted. And I was, as what typically happens in the victim situation, is they're forced to hold that secret from everybody they know. So I was threatened for my life if I said anything. So I held that secret from my family and from others, friends, and to an extent, even myself, right? You just, kind of bury it, pretend it doesn't happen. And,
Yeah.
but from that, I started to kind of like, I can't trust anybody. I can only rely on myself. And then I was afraid to be around my family too much, afraid I might say something, right? So I became isolated emotionally, even though physically I was with my parents growing up, right? And then, went to college and, progressively went through my life. And it wasn't really till I was 34. So now 24 years later, I was periodically going through psychotherapy because there were a lot of physical ramifications. I had a bad eating disorder. So there's, I think, holding onto a secret or not telling the truth or, hiding an addiction or hiding an affair. I don't know what it is, but when we hold on to secrets, it's so debilitating physically, because what you don't speak in truth, your body will speak out. And so that could be, in my case, I in order to control my environment, I controlled my eating and my body. And so I just one point was in the hospital and near death, and yeah, I wasn't going to make it. But I, somewhere in my head, when my dad was shaking me and saying, Kimberly, if you don't start eating, you're going to die, something flipped that said, I don't want to die. I've got to figure this out. Right.
Yeah.
And so, so I started to eat, but I was still isolated emotionally because I held onto that secret. So holding onto that secret creates that physical consequence, but it also creates the emotional consequence of feeling alone, isolated, disconnected. Nobody understands me. Nobody can relate to this. Oh my gosh, they'll think it's my fault. They'll judge me. They won't believe me. All those things that go through as a young child in any victim in any situation. So I know emotionally what that feels like, to be disconnected, to be, even when you're in the same room with people. So my point being is, when I got to 34, so 24 years later, I just was craving, and I was very successful at work. I mean, I was in sales, but I was craving feeling a connection with people, because I would sometimes feel like it's me outside looking into the situation and I'm not really there. I'm only part of me is there. And I remember when people would laugh, and you hear that guttural laugh, that deep laugh. I'm like, I want to laugh like that. Like, I want to laugh from the tips of my toes and feel clean from I just would imagine this light from God, this golden light that would shine through me from my head to my toes and all the way clean. And I just wanted that blackness gone. So long story short, that's where I confronted my abuser, told my parents everything. And so it was a big deal. It was a whole year of healing, and confronted my family. Told my family, and, confronted the abuser, told my brothers, went through psychotherapy on that. It was the most amazing thing, Reina, because people would come up to me that didn't even know me, and they would say, Kimberly, there's something different about you. It's almost like this light, this weight has been lifted to you. You're lighter, you're freer, you're happier. And that's when I started laughing from my gut. I was starting to be present. I was starting, because I accepted that within myself, and I was being accepted as, despite that happening to me. And it was just a whole new rebirth for me on just really to be able to connect, and to also connect with myself. We're all going through that journey, right? So
absolutely, it's where it begins, is connection with self, connection with the divine. And if you can't have that, it's really difficult to connect with anyone else.
Exactly. And so I've always knew I was going to write a book to an extent about my life, but I didn't want it to be about, what had happened to me. I wanted it to be more empowering. And so I do tell my story in my book, and the brief chapter about, why secrets are so detrimental to us physically and emotionally. But the purpose of the book is really for people to realize steps they can take daily to be more connected, especially in this digital age, and especially with all these other distractions, and especially with all our busyness, right? So does that make sense?
Absolutely. And, you know, going back to the trauma and the eating and the things that we do as a result of, like you said, the secrets that we're hiding and the things that we don't feel like we could connect with any other human on, because it feels like you're the only one who's been through it, even though you know logically, you know, as you grew up, you knew logically you weren't, but it still feels that way. It still feels like you can't share that. And I talked with a trauma therapist a while ago, and she was saying that whether it's an eating disorder or, you know, any other addiction, physical manifestation, it's usually from undealt with trauma. And just like you were saying, that it really goes down to I can't connect with myself because there's a trauma there that I can't handle, and I can't handle this part about my life. And so I love that you've really done the deep work of connecting with yourself, and you help others do the work of connecting with one another. Can you tell us a little bit about, I know that you work with businesses and organizations to help them connect to greater revenue. And then I love the part where it was like you help leaders connect leadership and their employees to attract, motivate, and retain talent in 90 days. That's a pretty bold statement. I love it.
Yes. So in kind of my thought about how can I best help people connect, right? And so I sat here and I thought, well, you know, I can do just individual coaching of individuals, which I do. Mm-hmm. However, I also thought, what's the greatest way to make an impact? And so if I can help leaders better connect with their teams and their employees, and that goes and so on and so on and so on, I can help more people feel connected that way by impacting at the top as it filters down, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that's kind of, I'm really doing a lot of research on, and it's kind of another reason why I wrote the book, and it's kind of funny with this whole thing now with COVID-19, but there is an isolation epidemic going on even before coronavirus. Absolutely. 47% of Americans feel alone and isolated, even though they're in families or whatever. And I know what that feels like. And that's got to stop. And when I'm doing more research now for my next book or my next talk, and looking at what's going on with COVID-19, obviously it's making it worse, right? Because the very thing we need to heal is community and being together and touching each other or candlelight vigils or whatever. But I want, you know, kind of why business, I want the workplace to become the new community place, because so many millennials don't have or don't leverage church as much as, say, our generation did, or having neighborhood block parties or knowing their neighbors or communing with their neighbors. You know, it's their communities on Facebook, their communities on Instagram, it's on Twitter, it's on a social media where they're not in person, right? So that's another reason I feel like if I can get leaders helping them better connect with their employees and giving them some of that validation as a human being, feeling cared about, you know, to the point of even being loved by a significant person that is a mentor, is powerful in their emotional development and feeling connected and feeling less isolated. You know, we spend 1/3 of our life at work. It should be positive, right?
Absolutely.
Fun, right?
And how do you connect with companies that are open to this concept? I know that, you know, I've worked with different executives, and I've seen some where the executive leadership are just like, you need to figure this out. This is a job. This is A, B, and C. I think you mentioned in one of your speeches, someone said, you know, I don't have time for the social stuff. And how do you get past that? I don't have time for this, you know, touchy-feely social kind of thing, to helping them realize when you actually connect to that, you're going to have so much of a driving force behind their work as well.
Yeah, it's just, here's the quote that I really like, is that, I should say statistic, that in interviewing employees, 40% of the employees say they would want, this is want, not need, but would want to do their job better if you would just acknowledge and praise them on a regular basis. 40%. Oh my gosh. Like imagine if you would just say, great job, Sally. Great job, Reina. Like, and actually say, great job, because I like the way you presented that topic to the client, or I like the way you actually listened to when the client had their objection and you incorporate that into your presentation.
Yeah.
But just actually validating people, I mean, and looking in their eyes, validating people is such a powerful, powerful, powerful tool to make people feel worthy, value, and like they're making a difference, right? So, you know, yes, it's especially if it's an older executive that's older than I am, it's hard for them because they're used to the very dictatorship where I told them to do this, they should do it. And
a hierarchy of corporate.
Exactly, right. And millennials aren't standing for that. They have options to come and go, right? And it's really our actions as leaders, our connectivity with our teams is the highest determination of whether that employee is going to stay with that company or it's going to go. You know, it's probably 70% of their decision making, right? If they don't like the leader and don't feel valued, or you know, it's not sorry the compensation, you know, it's just that.
I just had an executive that took a $20,000 pay cut to go to another company that totally appreciates him. You know, the last one, it was like nothing he could do was right. Even though he was doing the same work, they just weren't appreciating it. And this new one, $20,000 pay cut, and they're like, we can't believe that we have you. You're doing this for us, and all of your work is so appreciated. And you know, it was just this whole night and day experience. Same exact work, same exact work ethic, same exact person, but job hunting at the one place because they didn't appreciate anything and just kind of said, do your job, don't bother us. And when you do your job, it's not that good either, you know, again, same work. And then thinking that motivates them to do better. And then the next job, we're so grateful for you. We love your work. Thank you. And, you know, is just thrilled to be there, even at a less pay.
Yeah. It's kind of reminds me of something else. I think it was 57% of employees will leave for a like job, like pay, like compensation if they have a leader they just don't like or get along with or don't feel connected. And so in your case, they even went for less compensation. So
yeah.
Wow.
And that leader that they were working under couldn't keep a person for more than a year, you know? So it became really obvious once they got in that this leader can't retain employees because she was just, you know, super hard to work with and not grateful for anything. And so it was just a revolving door. And so you help someone like that. Do they, even some people who are stubborn, right? Like that person who said, I don't have time for the social stuff. You help that kind of person get in there, realize like you have to engage in the social stuff. You can't just be in here business only and get out the door. You're not going to have the kind of productivity you want.
Yeah. And I think, you know, that's why I'm kind of unique in my methodology, and that first, the CEO has to believe in what I'm sharing. I mean, and so that education buy-in has to happen at the top. Otherwise it's just not, you know, it's going to be temporarily in there, but it's not going to permeate and really help the organization continue to start to thrive and be at the earning potential they can if they had true high engagement, right? Let alone keep their people and let alone attract new talent. So, you know, I typically go for clients that I can see that their attrition rates are higher than normal. They're not able to get, you know, replace that position. So for instance, in your particular case with that leader, you know, if a person's smart enough to ask, can I talk to other people that have worked for this person, or can I talk to other, you know, they'll start to see, oh, what's the average turnover under this leader? When's, you know, it's like you know, there's not even if this was say a sales leader, there's not even a salesperson I can talk to that's worked for him that's still here. That's a problem, right? So
absolutely,
they start realizing that if they don't change, either get rid of the leader or change some of the dynamics, it's something whatever they were doing, downsizing, organizational restructuring, is not working anymore, right? So, you know, it's a fine nuance on helping to them understand what gets there. I think thankfully, and I'd say in even the last 5 years, the the soft skills, the having an EQ, not just an IQ, are becoming more prevalent as leadership and requirements of leadership versus, you know, say a decade ago was a lot more difficult of a conversation because it was soft skills aren't needed. We just need activity. Right. Yeah, you know.
And so I love you gave some of those statistics that, of course, you know, our employees are our most expensive asset in a company. And so you want to retain those employees. And you were saying that with a 1% increase in employee satisfaction, can you give us that?
Employee engagement. Like, so if you're able to measure your baseline of it from a percentage perspective through some assessment testing, between your employees and your leaders and your culture, if you're able to move the needle on that meter from, say, a 28% a level of engagement, let's say it's a 38% is where your baseline is. If you're able to move that up to 39% level of employee engagement, it has, and this is the number that the CEOs don't realize. It can have a $2,000 impact in your revenue annually if you're a small organization. 2 million, I should say it was 200,000 if you're small.
Okay, yeah.
2 million if you're a medium-sized organization, and 20 million if you're a large organization, and your revenue just by moving the needle by 1%, because it filters down to more sales closures as far as your reps being able to close sales, because they're better able to connect with the people they're selling to, right? Because you as a leader are connecting better to them, and you're mentoring and coaching them better, and you're collaborating with them on problem solving with this client, or the whole company now has a better ability to connect with customers to retain those customers. So you have less attrition of customers, right? So it kind of just feeds down, you know, people, we just talked about earlier that when employees feel praised, they want to do more. So now you've got people that want to be more creative, want to come up with a new idea and help to solve this problem, or a different presentation, or take on more responsibility, or just stay at work an hour later, right? So it all filters down when people feel a part of something, feel it's their community that they can help impact. It makes it a positive work environment, and then a profitable one too, right?
Yeah, and I imagine that ability to connect, to raise their EQ, flows over into all areas of life. You know, their home life is going to be better too, because they're able to recognize different ways of communicating with their people at home. And then when their home life's better, then their work life is better, and vice versa. Everything just starts flowing better when you can improve your relationships, because again, we're relational beings. I read somewhere, I think it was in a Harvard Business Review, and I could be quoting the numbers really off, but I think they were really high because these are Harvard business graduates, right? And I think it was something like the Harvard business graduates who described having warm relationships with their peers made something like I think $500,000 more annually than their counterparts who didn't describe having warm relationships with the people that they had around them. And it makes sense, you know, when people say your network is your net worth, but not just, you know, a whole bunch of people, but you truly see and know, and they know you. And that's when, you know, something comes up and you say, oh, I know someone who does that. Let me call them and I'll give you a warm introduction, right? And so everything moves more smoothly. Or someone, you know, sends you that business call. You don't even have to call on them. And so improving those relationships. So you're teaching a skill that is a lifelong skill they can use forever and ever. And I know that you follow up on that skill with the business owners, right? And you continue that teaching, because obviously skills we have to practice.
Right, exactly. So kind of in my unique piece is that it's a cultural assessment first, because we need a baseline. We can't measure improvement if we don't have a baseline, right? So the KCC Kimberly Connection Company team comes in, and we'll observe communication style between the top organization and the organization at whole, whether it's written or verbal, town halls, etc. How are meetings being conducted? How are leaders conducting meetings with their teams? What's the level of frequent communication on one-on-one? All those kind of parameters. And then there's some assessment surveys in there too. And from that, we identify 5 areas that can be impacted and start moving that needle a minimum of 1% in engagement over a 90-day period, right? But collaboratively, when I sit down with the executive team and say, here's the 5 things we found, here's what the impact would be. Which 3 do you want to work on over the next 90 days? So they pick what 3 ones they want to work on. And so from there, it starts filtering down. So then we build out the educational communication that's going to be delivered to the leaders. And it could be in a variety of formats. It could be workshops, it could be webinars, it could be keynotes. And I try to work with the level of availability of the leaders and what works on their calendar. But more importantly, when those 3 pieces are identified and educated, it has to be coached at the individual level. That's a piece that people miss.
Yeah.
Because I can come in and do an assessment. I can tell you what you can improve on. I can tell you how to improve that by education. But it's kind of like we go back to this. I think this is such a great statistics. If we would give praise to our employees, 40% would want to do their job better. So if I share that with a leader, Reina or Kimberly, I believe you. We got it down. How can I show praise? Educate them. However, if you go back on a one-on-one with them and you learn that they never received praise as a kid, never really felt they deserved it, and they just buttoned down and just did their job and put their head down and did it, why does my employee need to be praised by me? I did it without it. And so there's a block there, right? And they're not really comfortable delivering it. And so
it feels cheesy and fake because they're so not used to it. The only time they probably knew praise was sarcasm.
Right. And that's possibly what they're passing on to their employees. So
yeah,
how can you get them to adopt it and internalize it such that it becomes a part of their day-to-day leadership? You have to help them get that aha moment that, oh, wow, I'm not comfortable with, I've got to start getting comfortable with that, right? In order to really implement that with my team. And so that's why I think the coaching piece is a necessity along with the education, along with the assessment, so that it permeates the company and continues to go forward after the 90 days. So how do I keep it going? Because we know things change, business climates change, business environments change. All of a sudden, what used to be in the office is now virtual, right? So we just need to understand how to communicate and connect remotely now. But and then you have new employees that come through the organization, so leaders have new challenges with that personality, or you have just new leaders that are coming into the organization because the company's growing. So having a maintenance program of education and coaching, again, to continue what you just invested on and build is a necessity in order to, not have to go back to the bottom and come back out again, right? So it's about just keeping that level of engagement and always every year trying to improve it, right, as people come in. So that's kind of that's
yeah.
day spiel,
Well,
right?
and of course, like, you're gonna want to go out and try and have feedback.
Right.
Like you said, sometimes they're trying to do praise, but it's just nothing that they've ever been familiar with. So they come back with the feedback. Hey, I've been praising, but it feels really cheesy and nobody's accepting it. Okay, maybe there's some blocks there. We can work on that. I wanted to ask you about when you come up with the 5 things for a company, what are some of the common dynamics you're seeing that need to be improved on in different companies?
Great question. The praise, I think praise is very difficult for people, especially if most leaders are type A, right? Most leaders are pretty accomplished. So they've done it themselves, right? So to see the need that an employee needs that is kind of, come on. So that's usually always one thing in there, right? The other thing too is, and I'm just as guilty of this as when I was a leader in corporate, is you just get so busy with all your responsibilities, and we all hire teams to be able to run without us. I mean, that's ideally, we don't want to have to babysit, so to speak. But you have to build a connection with your team individually. And so incorporating one-on-one conversations between a leader and their team member is really important, and something they typically will, they would have a one-on-one scheduled on the calendar, but because they had a board meeting they had to get ready for, they canceled it. So then now it wasn't just 2 weeks out, it was a month out. And those are actually
starting to feel very unappreciated because everything is a higher priority than they are. And not just a meeting, but them.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden the year goes by and they're up for their annual review and they're like, you've had no involvement in their development really, let alone really given any coaching. So having a personal relationship is really important, not only from a professional perspective, but knowing them as people. So I really almost encourage leadership to put this in as their own performance guidelines as far as having regular one-on-ones with their employee. And I'm big about the power of connection over food. So even some of my coaching sessions, when I do roundtables with leaders, we have to do it at least over coffee, tea, or over lunch, or maybe like, a little brief happy hour, because people relax, people will share what's really going on, people will really connect. And so you have to, and I do that because you have to do these same things with your employees. I don't want you to practice at pie in the sky and then not do what I'm asking you. We'll practice having it over coffee. I want you to do the same thing with your employees, because when you're breaking bread or having coffee with your employee, it builds a stronger connection and the conversation goes much beyond work. And I almost instruct them to don't talk about work for the first 60 minutes and maybe the last 30, but really try to get to know that person, what motivates them, what's important in their life, what do they look forward to do when they get to outside of work, what motivates them outside of work to be successful inside of work. You need to know that, right?
Absolutely.
So
I had a boss once that it was actually years and years ago when I worked at Equinox, and I had my own business that was enough distance away that I made plenty of money in that. I actually was just at this job for the friends and the pool parties and like to be around people my own age. And he would constantly try to motivate me with, you can make this much money if you do this. And I'm thinking, I could do that in 1 hour with my own business, And so I eventually ended up telling him, like, hey, just so you know, I'm here for the pool parties and hanging out with people my own age. That's how you can motivate me. And he was like, oh, okay. And he shifted, and stopped going after if you do, because in that job I had to work, an extra 5-6 sessions to make what I'd make in 1 hour at my own business. So I'm like, that's not why I'm here. You need to motivate me with what motivates me.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, that's important. And because then it motivates you in your professional life. It's all tied together, right? It's all tied together. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've definitely noticed, like, if I remember when I was working on the private jets, and I eventually just like didn't have a solid home, because I think I spent 25 days in my apartment one year,
Wow.
1 year. And so I was just like I had some old clients of mine who were friends, and I would just stay with them. And I remember like they were just having kind of a rocky point in their marriage. And that was like my one time home. And I'm like, I didn't have any relaxation. I went back to work just as stressed as I had come, because you have to have all of that work-life balance, all the things that motivate you, like in a form of peace in those relationships sorted out, or all of the components start spinning and becoming out of control. So those are some of the things, is that praise and connecting one-on-one and over breaking bread or having coffee. What are some of the other common ones that you've come up with?
It's a simple thing, and I see this all the time, and people laugh, but they laugh because they know it's true. And I have the 3 daily steps of better connection. And they're like, what are they? I go, it's really hard. I go, what? I go, instead of texting somebody, why don't you pick up the phone and call them? That's number one. Because you know what, texting or email, it's all logical, but picking up the phone and hearing somebody's voice, that's emotional. That's going to connect you. So pick up the phone and call somebody. Number 2 would be, instead of sitting in your chair and emailing a colleague about, again, this is in an environment where, if you're in the office or whatever, but right now the calling is just as important, because, instead of texting, especially now, pick up the phone and and call and let somebody hear your voice. But instead of emailing, get up out of your chair, walk down the hall, and knock on Reina's door and say, hey, can I talk to you about something? You got a minute? And meanwhile, on the way, you ran into Jim, who just announced that his daughter just had her first baby. You're like, yay, let's celebrate. You would have never had that experience if you had just emailed Reina, right? If I just emailed you miss, and not to mention all the other stuff that goes with the fact you don't know the tone, you don't know the emotion. When somebody reads your email, you don't know their level of enthusiasm. So being in present body does so much for connection and engagement. And the third one is kind of what we talked about. But if you have an opportunity to have, instead of just sending an email or even having a phone conversation, having a cup of coffee with somebody in person, breaking bread is like, I always encourage them to try to have at least one meeting once a month with your team individually that's over a meal, or if possible, just to get to be able to really build that strong foundation. So those tend to be the three. You've also got just depending on the generation, but it's a lot of dictating as opposed to really trying to learn coaching skills that help the employee come up with their own ideas to solve a problem or to get a project done, right? Versus us as leaders instructing them the methodology to do it. I mean, generations today are extremely creative and have a lot of access to different tools and resources that allow them to show some of their own personality and their own creativity in completing that project, right? So
I have been floored to see how closely executive management models, good executive management models coaching, right? It really pulling the answers out of the people, not just telling them the answer. It's getting it, that creativity of the team to come up rather than just implement my ideas. There's so many similarities. It's mind-boggling. What do you do, I definitely want to get into how you're pivoting with people in this whole COVID-19 environment with connection, but what do you do for the people who, employees-wise, don't realize the value that actually money, dollars and cents wise, these kind of connections help them with when they go, I don't have time to walk across to that office. I've got stuff to do, or I don't have time to pick up the phone. I only have time for a 20-second text. I'm not going to sit on the phone with them for 30 minutes. When you do you ever butt up against that attitude in the employee side?
When you're saying that the employee doesn't have time to pick up the phone and call somebody, or doesn't want to receive the phone call from their leader, or I'm not quite sure I got the question.
They would rather send that email or text because they just want to move on to the next task, because they think they're going to be more effective if they just pop off that email and move on to this next task, rather than being distracted by talking to so-and-so in the hallway and then having a conversation that might last 20 minutes or so, and then they're an hour behind of their tasks and they feel like it's going to make them less effective. How do you counteract that with actually, once you start engaging, you're going to be such a more cohesive team that you're more effective, you're going to get more done?
Yeah, Reina, that's a great question, but there's a fine balance, because we all know those people that never get any work done because they're always on the phone, or they're always by the water cooler, or they're always in the lunchroom, or they're always checking and talking to somebody, right? So it's a balance. So I guess I would ask the employee about, it's almost take a quick personal assessment of, what am I trying to accomplish in sending this email to this person? Am I trying to get a meeting with them? Am I trying to get a response from them that's pretty detailed? And, what's the point of the communication? If it's to set up a meeting, then of course send the email, right?
Yeah.
And if they don't respond, pick up the phone.
Or just get on their calendar.
Right, exactly. But if it's to really have a meaningful dialogue, and you really don't know this person and you need their input in order to help vote for your decision on the project, well then shoot, it's worth your time to build a connection with that person to help you, right? So, sometimes, connection is not always efficient, just like love is not efficient.
Yeah.
Love takes an investment in your partner when it's inconvenient. Connection takes an investment in your employee or your peer or another person, even when it's not convenient. I mean, that's why we choose to do digital, because it's convenient, it's fast, I check the box.
Mm-hmm.
But I beg the question during this remote virtual working, yeah, your sales people got 5 sales calls done today over Zoom. Rah, rah. I would love to see how many clients they close at the end of this.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not building human connection, you're doing transactional here. And so it goes back to the question of, what are you trying to accomplish in your communication? If it's purely just transactional, great. But if you're really wanting to get to know this person or connect with this person to build a bond that's going to elevate your relationship so that you're supportive of each other, you have a goal you're trying to achieve, you're trying to get, you know what I mean? A sale, a speaking gig, approval for a financial budget, whatever it is, then you need to start looking at your action here and rethinking that meeting them in person or having a phone conversation is not a time waster. It's a connector builder.
Yeah.
And that's where, and so it's really having to start learning to be consciously deciding what that is. And so sometimes it might be doing less tasks, but doing more connection that in the long run is going to put you farther along where your goals are.
Absolutely. And so in this space of COVID-19 and all the distancing and being on Zoom calls and not being able to break bread, although I have heard of people doing Zoom dinners together, but it's still not the same. I love, tell us the story before we pivot into that, because I think it's a good segue, about how babies learn languages from their parents within a couple months.
Yes, right. So this is actually a Wall Street Journal article that came out about a month or so back. It was called The Science of Connection. And it talked about that they did 2 experiments. Okay, so they had a baby, and it was their mother or their father who was communicating to the baby in person in a different language over, say, the course of a month. Mm-hmm. And then they did the same exercise where the baby was seeing their parent speak to them in a different language over Zoom. The children or the babies that experienced the parental conversation over Zoom learned nothing. Absolutely not even an inch of anything. Yeah. Versus the babies that saw their parents in person, all the eye contact, the verbal cues, the tone of the voice, the energy coming from their parent, all that stuff comes into play.
Something, right? Like coffee cup,
Right.
You can't do that over Zoom. I can't point at your room right now.
Yeah. It's just so, and eye contact is so important as a child, and validating a child as a human being. And that first moment of eye gazing from their parent is so important for their self-confidence and development. And so when you're doing Zoom, that's delayed by 1.2 seconds. So it's not on, subconsciously, we don't know that, but subconsciously that's what we're picking up on. We're not getting that direct eye contact because there's a lag in it, right? So the babies naturally feel that, right? So that's why they're not able to assimilate the new language. It's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we cope now with, and even with what's going on, more people are working from home after the pandemic. People have gotten used to being home, not having a commute, and companies are beginning to bring that in as part of the model. How do we remain connected in a world that's gone so digital?
Great question. So, I think it's understanding how to leverage digital technology for your advantage, but then also realizing what its, I don't say weaknesses necessarily, but where it kind of bottoms out, right? Where it's not going to be fulfilling. And so, I'm not going to argue with the fact that if you had a long commute, working from home is just lovely. You could shoot me. I'm not going to take a job in LA and commute every day. There's just no way. I won't do it. So, and I've always had the luxury of being in sales and working from home, but I was always out meeting with people and in person with people. So working from home I wasn't really there. It was just my home base, right? So, and I'm personally having a hard time during this time, because Zoom I just feel like I'm dumping all my energy and it's not coming back, you know?
Yeah. And you're sitting all day. You don't even get up to, like you said, go across the hall and sit near the next meeting, and it's very exhausting.
So for me personally, if I'm going to have a one-on-one conversation, I actually like the phone. I don't know if it's because I'm able to move around, but I feel like I'm, for some reason, more present. I feel like there's maybe less of the delay of the 1.2 seconds in the voice or whatever. But for me personally, it just, not that it doesn't, if I haven't seen someone for a long time, that I would not want to see them in person on Zoom, but I just feel personally, I don't know what it is, when I'm having a phone conversation, I feel a little bit more connected. So how do we do that during this time? It's really, I think self-care is really important, because you're not really connecting with anybody. It's really important to be connecting with yourself and getting centered. So I'm a big proponent of meditation. I don't do it very, very long, but if I just feel like I'm just missing something, I'll go back to that source of meditation, which is also connecting with God, really, when you're connecting with yourself and you're in the divine energy, right? So I think meditation is really important. Obviously, if there's somebody in your house you can take a walk with and be out in the nature, if there's, you know, somebody that you have as a partner that you can take a walk or be out in the nature and do something collectively together. I always laugh when talking to couples. Remember when you were dating? Remember how, you would just like, hey, you want to play hooky? Get out of the office 2 hours on Friday and let's go pack a picnic, or, you know, or hey, you know, meet me for lunch, right? And you did all those things, these little surprise common experiences, and you took a dance class together, or maybe you went bowling, but you did all these great fun things together. Then we get married, we check the box, we're both off doing our work, passing in the night, whatever it is. Guess what? You're no longer sharing a common experience. No wonder people grow apart. So my point being is, if you can start sharing common experiences, that's why I think it's so kind of awesome during this time. I hope people are having more breaking bread and more family dinners together, planning meals together, doing Scrabble together, puzzles together, anything you can be doing together to build out a project, to have a finish and an end together. You know, I hate to use this analogy, but you wonder why there are so many affairs that occur at work, because you're spending all this time together and you're working on a common project. You just won the sale. You just got the project done. We all go out to celebrate. Hello, you know, been a long 10 months.
We're at home. We get home, we're tired. Sometimes our family gets the leftover energy, the leftover time, and we're no longer connected. And so that totally makes sense. So we want to meditate. And by the way, we have, if you go to the Reina Rose Soul Nutritionist YouTube, I have like 1 minute meditations for people who just like, you know, if you seriously only have 60 seconds, you could turn on this meditation 60 seconds and just bring yourself back to where you want to be. Like I even encouraged back when we did have commutes, you know, 1 minute before you get back into the house, just reset, be at home. Connect with those people, you know, but you have to connect with yourself before you can connect to others. And so, or 1 minute before you get to the office, if you just left the crazy kids and everybody running around, you know, we all have 60 seconds. That's never going to blow your schedule. And so I love that meditation, but then the common projects. And I like too, some fun ones, you know, that we're enjoying each other, we're connecting. And I know for me, for those who studied the Enneagram, I joke that I'm like a 7.7, and the 7, your motivation is fun and everything. So I will create like really effective systems so I can go have fun, you know, get my work done quickly and like go have fun. And so I think as we create fun and we play in our days, there's so many studies of how important it is to play and have fun and do common projects. So I love these suggestions for people, because no matter where you work, you can implement, you know, doing a quick meditation. It doesn't have to be an hour long. And
I will look up your meditations. That's such a great idea. And, you know, I think so many people feel meditation has to be in the morning. It's just whenever you feel you need it. Like you could just be in that, you just got out from an appointment going back to work and you're just having a crappy day, sit in the car for 1 minute and listen to one of your 1 minute meditations. It can change your mood pretty quick. And that's so powerful. You're offering that, Reina.
Yeah, and I just figured, everyone has 60 seconds. And so I'm going to work on putting some 5-minute ones on there because I figure the 1 minute's your training wheels. And if you want 5 minutes, you could have 5 minutes. But and I've seen meetings too, where people are having team meetings in like a huddle environment in a corporation, and they just go so all over the place. And I think if you just have 1 minute of meditation before you started, you could focus in on what needed to get done, and then you can use that extra time to connect and to find out, rather than just the meeting kind of spinning. And so I love meditation. To me, is just key on being both connected and effective in everything you're doing, because like you said, there's that fine balance. You don't want to be sitting at the water cooler all day, but you don't want to be avoiding it because you are getting every task done in
right. And you kind of asked this question. So what are, what I think companies that were reticent to allow for remote work or virtual work environments, and now obviously being forced to do that in a matter of a week or two, and now seeing the success for that. Part of it, I think it's a couple things. It's new to a lot of people. So they love the excitement of it right now. They're loving not the commute. They're getting a lot done. Obviously kids interruption, cats, dogs, all that stuff too. And then also, unfortunately, fear of losing their job. So they don't want to look like they're not working. Right. So, but I think
harder than ever in some
cases
because and not in a good way, like wake up, finish breakfast, go straight to work, eat some dinner, maybe get some work done after that. And it's not effective work. It's not the most productive work. And I've definitely seen that during this crisis, that people are working more than ever before.
And that's the burnout. And then they're not even connecting with the people that are in their house. Right. So I can see where it's going to swing back, where in talking to companies, they're thinking about, they want to offer remote virtual work because it's attractive. Right. But they're also going to want some degree in the office. And so the question becomes, how do you bring them back into the office? What's going to be the destination? What's the draw?
Yeah.
And so that's when it can come back to, all right, let's do something fun. It doesn't have to come in to do like a work party, but maybe it comes into doing a project in person together, or, everybody brings an issue they're trying to solve, and we all collaborate in that day, try to solve everybody's problem. I don't know what it is, but somehow getting people back in the office for the purpose of connecting in person. Of course, I'm going to say, make sure they're having lunch together or something together, right? So,
and
but
not
I think
for necessarily just PowerPoint meetings, because that you on Zoom. Like, don't bring them in to look at a screen.
Right, exactly. None of that. It should be all interactive. Yeah, and it can even. I'm always like you. Just I'm a big proponent of fun, and as much as possible incorporating fun even in the day. So I'm a big one about throwing in humor, and but I think that maybe you only have 4 to 5 hours of your day at work, and then there's a 2-hour where you do something fun together. I don't know, right? But I think having kind of a destination of a day with the team together is, I think, important, and making people feel a part of something when they're back working from home. And then it manages the whole commute thing too.
Yeah, definitely. And I think companies are probably going to have to experiment whether once a month will do, or it needs to be once a week, or how often we really need to get people in to connect and really know each other. But I think as we progress, this whole time will have turned into a good experience for everyone moving forward, because hopefully they'll be able to bring that connection home, lower those commutes, work an effective normal amount that they would have worked before, because now they're just including the commute times into their work. Right. Which, if it got more actually done, that might be okay, but I think we're finding so far that it's not necessarily getting more done. Yeah, and so, well, Kimberly, it's been such a joy chatting with you. You're such a wealth of knowledge, and I hope anyone out there, if you have a business and you want to bring in more revenue by getting people to connect more and realize after watching this show, the statistics that these soft skills really increase the bottom line revenue, make sure to contact Kimberly. Kimberly, where can we find you?
You can Google the Kimberly Connection Company. That'll bring up my website. It's www.kimberly hyphen Layne, LAYNE.com. So it's KIMBERLY hyphen Layne, LAYNE.com. Would love to hear from y'all.
Get that up on the screen so that everybody can copy it down. Perfect. Wonderful. So the best place to get a hold of you is on that website.
Or they can email me at kcc@kimberly-layne.com. So
perfect. Wonderful. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you all for watching. And until I see you next time, may the Lord bless and keep you, cause his face to shine upon you, and nourish your soul.